If you had $500,000 saved for retirement, would it be enough? Some people would panic. Others would feel relieved. And many would immediately start searching for a bigger number. But the real answer may have less to do with the number itself and more to do with the life you want to live. Today, let's explore what $500,000 can and cannot do in retirement, and why a comfortable retirement is often about much more than the size of your portfolio.
Quiet wealth, calm finance, better life.
Why $500,000 creates so much anxiety? Few retirement numbers create more anxiety than $500,000. Part of the reason is that it sits in an uncomfortable middle ground. It's not a tiny amount of money, but it's not the kind of number that makes people feel unquestionably secure. When people hear about retirement, they are often surrounded by enormous figures. $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. Financial headlines frequently suggest that retirement requires more and more money. And after hearing those numbers repeatedly, something interesting happens. People begin comparing. Someone with $500,000 starts looking at someone with $1 million. Someone with $1 million starts looking at someone with $2 million. The target keeps moving. The comparison never ends. But retirement is not a competition. And perhaps that's the first thing we need to remember. Because $500,000 means very different things to different people. For one retiree, it may represent decades of disciplined saving. For another, it may feel frighteningly inadequate. For someone living in a high-cost city, it may create concern. For someone living a simpler lifestyle in a lower-cost area, it may provide meaningful security. The number itself doesn't tell the whole story, and that's why this conversation matters. When people ask whether $500,000 is enough for retirement, they're usually asking a much deeper question. They're asking, will I be okay? Will I have enough freedom? Will I be able to enjoy life? Will I become a burden to my family? Will I spend my later years worrying about money? These are emotional questions, human questions, questions that cannot be answered by a calculator alone. The truth is that retirement planning often becomes too focused on numbers. Numbers are important, of course they are, but numbers exist to support a life. The goal isn't accumulating the largest portfolio possible. The goal is creating a retirement that feels stable, meaningful, and sustainable. And that's why today we're not simply asking whether $500,000 is enough. We're asking something more important. Enough for what? The wrong question most people ask. When people discuss retirement savings, the conversation often begins with a simple question. Is $500,000 enough? At first, that sounds reasonable, but it's actually the wrong question. Because enough has no meaning without context. Enough for whom? Enough for what lifestyle? Enough for how many years? Enough in what location? Imagine asking someone whether a car is fast enough. The answer depends entirely on the situation. Fast enough for city driving? Fast enough for racing? Fast enough for long-distance travel? The same principle applies to retirement. $500,000 might support one lifestyle comfortably and struggle to support another. That's why the better question is not, is $500,000 enough? The better question is, what kind of retirement am I trying to create? Because retirement isn't a financial product, it's a lifestyle. Some retirees dream of extensive travel. Others dream of gardening, reading, and spending time with grandchildren. Some want to live in expensive metropolitan areas. Others prefer smaller communities with lower costs. The difference between those lifestyles can be enormous, and yet people often ignore that distinction. Instead, they focus entirely on the size of the portfolio. But retirement planning starts with life planning, not the other way around. The portfolio supports the life. The life does not exist to support the portfolio. Once we understand that idea, retirement becomes easier to evaluate, because we're no longer chasing someone else's number. We're building our own version of enough. Meet Susan. Let's imagine a retiree named Susan. Susan is 65 years old. After a long career, she recently retired. She has approximately $500,000 invested. Her home is fully paid off. She receives Social Security. She carries no significant debt. And like many new retirees, she has one question on her mind. Will this be enough? At first, Susan focuses entirely on the number, 500,000. She compares herself to financial articles, online discussions, retirement calculators, stories about millionaires, and almost immediately she feels anxious, because no matter where she looks, someone seems to have more. But over time, Susan begins asking different questions. What are my actual expenses? What kind of life do I want? What truly matters to me? As she explores those questions, something surprising happens. Her anxiety begins to decrease, because she realizes that her retirement doesn't need to resemble anyone else's. She doesn't want luxury travel every month. She doesn't need a second home. She doesn't spend extravagantly. What she wants is stability, freedom, time with family, occasional travel, a comfortable home, good health care, and enough flexibility to enjoy life. Suddenly, the conversation changes. Instead of comparing her savings to someone else's savings, she begins comparing her resources to her actual needs. And that's a much more useful comparison. The lifestyle factor. One reason retirement planning feels confusing is that the word retirement means different things to different people. For some, retirement means adventure. For others, it means simplicity. Neither approach is right or wrong, but they require different resources. Imagine 3 retirees. The first spends much of the year traveling. Hotels, flights, restaurants, tours. The second enjoys a quiet life at home, reading, walking, gardening, visiting friends. The third focuses primarily on family, helping grandchildren, hosting gatherings, supporting loved ones. Each retiree may be equally happy, yet their expenses may differ dramatically. This is why retirement planning cannot be separated from lifestyle planning. A portfolio doesn't exist in isolation, it exists in service of a life. And understanding the life you're trying to create often matters more than chasing a specific number. Why location matters more than people think. Another factor that dramatically influences retirement is location. The same amount of money can create very different experiences depending on where someone lives. Imagine spending retirement in a high-cost city. Housing costs are higher, taxes may be higher, everyday expenses may be higher. Now imagine retiring in a smaller community where housing is affordable and daily expenses are lower. The difference can be substantial. This doesn't mean one location is better than another. It simply means context matters. Retirement numbers never exist in a vacuum. They interact with the realities of daily life, and those realities vary from place to place. Susan eventually realized this herself. She didn't need to live where costs were highest. She needed to live where her lifestyle and finances aligned. That realization gave her options, and options are one of the most valuable forms of financial security. The income sources nobody talks about. One of the biggest mistakes people make when evaluating retirement readiness is focusing entirely on the portfolio. They look at $500,000 and stop there. But retirement income often comes from multiple sources: Social Security, pensions, part-time work, rental income, other investments. These income streams matter. Sometimes they matter enormously. Susan's $500,000 portfolio was only part of her retirement picture. Her Social Security benefits provided a foundation. That foundation reduced the pressure on her investments, which meant her portfolio didn't need to carry the entire burden alone. Many retirees overlook this idea. They compare portfolio balances without considering total income. But retirement spending is funded by income streams, not portfolio balances alone. And once Susan began looking at the complete picture, she saw something important. She wasn't relying on one source. She was relying on a system, a collection of resources working together. And that perspective made retirement feel far less intimidating. What $500,000 actually produces? At some point, every retirement conversation returns to the same question. How much income can $500,000 realistically provide? It's a fair question. After all, retirement savings are not meant to sit untouched forever. They exist to support life. One common framework is the 4% rule. Under that approach, a portfolio of $500,000 might initially support withdrawals of roughly $20,000 per year. A more conservative approach might suggest $17,500. Some retirees prefer even lower withdrawal rates. Others are comfortable taking slightly more. But before we become too focused on the exact number, it's important to remember something. Retirement income rarely comes from only one source. Let's return to Susan. Suppose Susan receives Social Security benefits that provide an additional $24,000 per year. Suddenly, the picture changes. Now her retirement income is no longer $20,000. It's closer to $44,000. And for many households, that's a meaningful difference. The lesson isn't that every retiree will have the same income. The lesson is that retirement planning works best when we view the complete picture. Not just one account balance, not just one withdrawal strategy, the complete picture. Because retirement is often funded by several streams working together. And when those streams work together effectively, a portfolio that once seemed small can begin to look surprisingly capable. The biggest risk isn't what most people think. Ask most people about retirement risks, and you'll often hear the same answer: the stock market. And while market declines certainly matter, they are not always the greatest threat. In fact, some of the biggest retirement risks receive far less attention. The first is longevity. Simply put, people are living longer. For many retirees, that's wonderful news. Longer life means more time with family, more experiences, more opportunities. But it also means savings may need to last longer than previous generations expected. A retirement that lasts 30 years requires a different mindset than one lasting 15 years. The second risk is inflation. We've already discussed how inflation quietly raises the cost of living, but its long-term impact deserves respect. Small annual increases can compound dramatically over decades. And then there is healthcare, perhaps the most unpredictable expense of all. Most retirees will face healthcare costs, but very few know exactly when those costs will appear or how large they might become. This uncertainty makes retirement planning challenging. Not because retirees are doing something wrong, but because life remains unpredictable. And perhaps that's the most important lesson. Retirement success is not about eliminating uncertainty. It's about building enough flexibility to live with uncertainty. The people who make $500,000 work. One of the most encouraging observations in retirement planning is that many people retire comfortably with far less than headlines suggest. Not because they're lucky, not because they're financial geniuses, but because they possess certain habits and characteristics. First, they are flexible. When circumstances change, they adapt. If markets decline, they may temporarily reduce discretionary spending. If expenses rise, they adjust priorities. They understand that retirement is a journey, not a fixed formula. Second, they carry little debt. Debt can create enormous pressure in retirement. Without large monthly obligations, retirees often gain greater freedom and resilience. Third, they maintain realistic expectations. They don't expect retirement to resemble a permanent luxury vacation. Instead, they focus on what truly brings satisfaction: relationships, health, purpose, community, simple pleasures. And perhaps most importantly, they understand the difference between wealth and lifestyle. Many retirees discover that happiness depends less on spending and more on alignment. Alignment between values and choices. Alignment between expectations and reality. Alignment between money and meaning. These retirees rarely appear in headlines, yet they quietly build fulfilling lives every day. The people who struggle with more than $500,000. Now, let's look at the other side of the story, because something surprising often happens in retirement. Some people struggle despite having significantly more than $500,000. They have $1 million, $2 million, sometimes even more. Yet they remain anxious. Why? Because financial security and emotional security are not always the same thing. Imagine a retiree who spent 40 years accumulating wealth. Saving became second nature. Protecting money became a habit. Monitoring risk became a daily routine. Then retirement arrives. The portfolio is healthy. The finances are strong. Yet the mindset never changes. Every purchase feels uncomfortable. Every withdrawal feels dangerous. Every expense feels like a threat. The problem is no longer financial, it's psychological. The retiree has learned how to accumulate wealth, but never learned how to use it. And that's a surprisingly common challenge. Many people spend decades preparing for retirement financially. Far fewer prepare emotionally, because retirement requires a different relationship with money. Money shifts from being something you build to something that supports the life you've built. And making that transition isn't always easy, which is why comfort in retirement cannot be measured solely by portfolio size. A larger portfolio does not automatically create peace of mind. Peace of mind often comes from clarity, perspective, and confidence in one's plan. What comfortable retirement really means. After all this discussion, we arrive at a surprisingly simple question. What does a comfortable retirement actually mean? Many people assume comfort means luxury, expensive travel, luxury homes, unlimited spending. But for most retirees, comfort means something much simpler. Stability, freedom, choice, peace of mind. The ability to pay bills without constant worry. The ability to handle unexpected expenses. The ability to spend time intentionally. The ability to enjoy relationships and experiences without feeling financially trapped. These things rarely make headlines, Yet they often define successful retirement. Susan eventually realised this. Her goal wasn't becoming wealthy. Her goal was creating a life she enjoyed. A life with enough flexibility to travel occasionally, enough security to sleep peacefully, enough freedom to spend time with family, enough confidence to stop comparing herself to everyone else. And once she focused on those goals, something remarkable happened. $500,000 stopped feeling like a test and started feeling like a tool that could help support the life she wanted to live.
So, can you retire comfortably with $500,000? The honest answer is that some people can, and some people can't, but not necessarily for the reasons most people expect. Because retirement is rarely determined by a single number. It's shaped by lifestyle, location, health, income sources, expectations, flexibility, and countless personal choices. Two people can retire with exactly the same portfolio and experience completely different outcomes. One may feel content, the other may feel anxious. One may focus on gratitude, the other may focus on comparison. One may see opportunity, the other may see limitation. The difference is often far greater than the portfolio itself. That's why retirement is not a competition. There will always be someone with more, there will always be someone with less, and comparison can become an endless game with no winner. Instead, the more useful question is this: what kind of life am I trying to build? Because once that question becomes clear, financial decisions often become clearer as well. Retirement is not about reaching someone else's number. It's about understanding your own. It's about creating a life that aligns with your values, your priorities, your definition of enough. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. A comfortable retirement isn't built by chasing someone else's dream. It's built by understanding your own. Thank you for spending this time with me. And if these conversations help you think more calmly about money and retirement, I hope you'll join me again. Quiet wealth is built slowly and lived fully.
Quiet wealth. Calm finance. Better life.